No discussion about mainstream media manipulation or fake news would be complete without a full understanding of Operation Mockingbird, which was discovered during a 1975 congressional hearing that found the CIA was spending $1 billion a year in 2021 dollars adjusted for inflation in under-the-table bribes to American news outlets, editors, and reporters in exchange for their covert cooperation to act as government mouthpieces to spread propaganda and act as gatekeepers to make sure that certain information doesn't get any coverage. The congressional committee called the Church Committee, named after Senator Frank Church of Idaho, revealed that, quote, the CIA currently maintains a network of several hundred individuals around the world who provide intelligence for the CIA and at times attempt to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda. These individuals provide the CIA with direct access to a large number of newspapers and periodicals, scores of press services and news agencies, radio and television stations, commercial book publishers, and other foreign media outlets. After the Church Committee's report was completed, Rolling Stone magazine published an article written by Carl Bernstein, hot off his Watergate fame, naming some of the prominent journalists involved with Operation Mockingbird, who worked for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, Time Magazine, the New York Herald Tribune, Miami News, and a whole bunch of other outlets. Shortly after these revelations, the former president of CBS, Sid Mickelson, was asked if the CIA still worked with reporters, and here's his answer.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
Once uncovered by the Church Committee, the CIA tried to paint Operation Mockingbird as something that only functioned to influence foreign press. But Carl Bernstein, before he sold his soul to CNN, admitted that, quote, the CIA's use of the American news media has been much more extensive than agency officials have acknowledged publicly or in closed sessions with members of Congress. He goes on to say that the use of journalists has been among the most productive means of intelligence gathering employed by the CIA. The CIA director at the time, William Colby, admitted during the Church hearings that people in management were involved, not just reporters, and that they helped the CIA with the program. And while Colby wouldn't name names, Carl Bernstein pointed to William Paley, who was president of CBS, Henry Luce, the founder of Time Magazine, and Arthur Hayes Slutzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, who actually admitted the CIA had him sign a non-disclosure agreement. At least 10 employees at the New York Times were working as CIA assets or were actual CIA agents who the paper was providing cover for, often in their foreign bureau. The CIA even had a training program in the 1950s which taught agents how to pretend to be journalists and were sometimes placed in major news organizations with the help of management. It wasn't just newspapers, of course. The big three television networks were involved as well. CBS provided journalistic cover for CIA employees and allowed their newsrooms to be monitored by the CIA. Carl Bernstein said that in the 1950s and 60s, CBS officials even met for an annual dinner with the CIA. Sid Mickelson later admitted that when he became the president of CBS News, that he was told by William Paley, the outgoing president, that there was an ongoing relationship with the CIA.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole News and Public Affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
High-level CIA officials worked with top management of the news agencies to give agents working undercover as journalists assignments in foreign countries, according to Bernstein, and the CIA had some of the best-known correspondents in the business as operatives, using TV networks as journalistic cover. During the Church hearings, then CIA Director William Colby tried to claim that they weren't doing any of this anymore and downplayed the program, saying it didn't work as well as they had hoped, but he was just whitewashing its effectiveness, and many have said that the church hearing itself was part of the cover-up. For example, they didn't even question any of the journalists or executives who were working for the CIA. Why wouldn't they want to get major media executives and reporters on the witness stand to testify under oath about what they were doing? They should have been a key part of the investigation, but it wasn't. Why? Because they didn't want to dig that deep. They didn't want the extent of the program and who was involved to be known. The committee was compromised and limited their investigation to prevent the magnitude of what was happening from actually being made public. At the time of the Senate investigation, George Bush Sr. was the director of the CIA and pressured members of the committee and successfully persuaded them to essentially whitewash the investigation. The CIA refused to turn over documents about which journalists were working for them and only gave the committee rewritten summaries of documents, all of which had the names of journalists and media executives removed. Most of the documents they did turn over were about foreign journalists on foreign soil, giving the false impression that such thing wasn't happening in America. Speaking of the Church Committee's final report, Senator Gary Hart said that, quote, "It hardly reflects what we found. There was a prolonged and elaborate negotiation with the CIA over what would be said." In other words, it was a whitewash. Just another limited hangout with some damning information, but as usual, the full truth would remain hidden. Most people are completely unaware of the Church Committee today, and if they were told about Operation Mockingbird, would just think that it's a conspiracy theory. But as one unnamed senator quoted in Carl Bernstein's Rolling Stone story says, from the CIA's standpoint, this was the highest, most sensitive covert program of all. It was a much larger part of the operational system than has been indicated. During the early years of the Iraq War, the U.S. military secretly paid Iraqi newspapers to publish stories written by U.S. soldiers while claiming that they were written by Iraqis who supported the U.S. invasion. Of course, most of the American mainstream media parroted the fear-mongering false claims of the Bush administration about the supposed threat posed by Saddam Hussein and his non-existent weapons of mass destruction. Anyone with an ounce of common sense knows that Operation Mockingbird type of activities continue to this day, despite the claim by the CIA that they ended the program after it was exposed back in the 1970s. Oh, and by the way, CNN's Anderson Cooper interned with the CIA for not one, but 2 summers when he was in college. But when this was reported 20 years later, he claimed that he decided not to pursue a career with them, and even though he had no training at all or experience as a journalist, quickly became one of the faces of CNN and one of America's biggest liars. And I'm sure that that's all just a coincidence. There's so much more that you should know, so order my book, The True Story of Fake News, How Mainstream Media Manipulates Millions, in paperback from Amazon.com, or download the ebook from any of the major ebook stores. And of course, there's a link to the Amazon listing in the description below, so head on over there and check it out.